Thank you, Kevin. That was great. Thanks to the kids. That was fun. Always love learning something. If you're feeling a little toasty this morning, it's not just you. We're figuring out some of the heat system. It said it was on heat this morning. We turned it on cool, and still it got hotter after we turned it on cool. So we will have it figured out for next week. Rest assured. Don't worry about that. Well, good morning, church. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Curtis, and I have the privilege of being one of the pastors on staff here at Living Hope. And if you are new with us, welcome. This summer, if you haven't heard, we're going through a series called Summer in the Psalms. And this morning, we will be looking at Psalm chapter 4. I was reading a book the other day, and it was talking about changes throughout history a little bit on one piece of the book. And the author mentioned that more now than ever throughout history, our minds and our bodies are left overstimulated and exhausted at the end of each day. And so as we jump into Summer in the Psalms, we pray that each one of you finds new ways to rest with God and experience Him. So we're at Psalm chapter 4 this morning. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there with me. And if you are willing and able, I'll just ask you to stand with me as we read God's Word this morning. Psalm chapter 4, verses 1 to 8. Answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. Give me relief from my distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer. How long will you people turn my glory into shame? How long will you love delusions and seek false gods? Know that the Lord has set apart his faithful servant for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Tremble and do not sin when you are on your beds. Search your hearts and be silent. Offer the sacrifices of the righteous and trust in the Lord. Many, Lord, are asking, who will bring us prosperity? Let the light of your face shine on us. Fill my heart with joy when their grain and new wine abound. In peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. This is God's word, and we believe it. You can have a seat. One of the more recent pieces of history that I enjoy looking back on and getting a bit of a chuckle every now and then happened on January 1st in the year 2000. I don't know if there's some of you that probably weren't there yet. Some of you won't really remember, but I'm sure there's a good chunk of you that remember that day and the night before. That was Y2K, right? The day that was supposed to, the world was supposed to fall into ruin, right? All because of a calendar error in computers, or so it's told, right? They thought that the banking systems, the transit systems, the government systems, all those things on computers that relied on that, all those vital systems in our society would fail because of a simple calendar error in the coding, right? And it would leave the world in chaos. That's what the thought was. And so for those of you who were around, how well do you remember that event? What do you remember about the months, the weeks, the days leading up to that time, or even the night of that event, right? How did it affect your life? I remember my cousin and I, our whole family was watching the countdown, the New Year's countdown on TV, and my cousin had the remote to the TV, I had the light switch, and as soon as midnight hit, everything turned off. And our family was a little confused, and we were so proud of ourselves. But do you remember that time where it seemed like so many people were in panic? So many people were stocking up for the end of the world, it seemed like something was going to happen. And every few years, it happens again. Something happens again where it seems like there's an end of the world prediction, right? We heard about this. There's a whole movie on 2012, the end of the world. Each there's also been, I think, over half a dozen over the past decade, more predictions of the end of the world, right? And each of which has brought distress, worry, panic upon so many people, causing them to live their life at that time in panic and fear and distress, trying to figure out what's going to save them to find peace. Right? And one of the more recent events I think we've all experienced is a global pandemic. Right? And how did you see people respond? You buy toilet paper. That's where I find peace. Right? This will keep you alive as more toilet paper. Right? And I'm not trying to downplay the seriousness of diseases or ailments or a pandemic or anything like that. I'm not saying we shouldn't do anything when any of these situations necessarily arise. But there is a universal reality that when distress comes into our life, we will respond either from a place of peace or a place of distress. Right? And if we don't have peace, we're going to seek after something to bring us that peace. Right? And Psalm 4 is written by King David, and many scholars believe that it's connected to Psalm 3 as well, which is another psalm of his distress from his adversaries and his opponents, one of which is his own son, Absalom, who's wanting the throne for himself. But in chapter 4, it's considered to be a mixture of both confidence and lament. Right? Lament or confidence or peace within King David's distress. And within many of King David's psalms, regarding whatever situation that he's in, he provides the reader with guidance in life. And in verse 1, right away, we get our first little nugget of wisdom from King David. He's distressed, and what does he do? He calls out to God. What's your go-to plan or the first step of action you take when you find yourself in distress, when you're feeling cornered, when you feel like there's no solution to your problem? What do you seek after? Verse 1 shows us that the first step that David took and that we should take as well in our distress, regardless of our circumstance or situation, is to seek God in distress. We seek God in distress. King David goes straight to God in pretty much every psalm you see him write about. Pretty much every beginning is him going right to God, crying out to God. Right? And that's the first verse in chapter 4 as well. And at the first verse, there are two things that he attributes to God. First, he says that God is righteous. Whatever God does is right and good. When God judges, he is right. When God corrects, he is right. When he serves punishment, he is right. When he is patient with sinners, he is right. And when he hands us over to our own sinful desires, he is right. Right? As hard as it seems to us, whatever God is doing, whatever he chooses to do is right. And King David acknowledges that God is righteous, no one else. And the next thing that he acknowledges is that God is merciful. Have you ever had to ask for mercy for something in life, whether you were a kid and you're trying not to get punished, so you're just begging, for mercy from a parent or a teacher? Right? If you've ever asked for mercy, chances are it's because you did something that deserves punishment. Right? And David is not here complaining that he didn't deserve anything, right? Or he's not blaming God or questioning what's happening, but he's acknowledging his distress. He's bringing it to God, and he's telling God, you are righteous, but have mercy on me. Have mercy in my distress. In verse 2, David writes about the source of his distress, and it's from those who are seeking to turn his glory into shame. And the source of David's glory, of King David's glory, comes from God, God's glory, who is the King of kings. And so he cries out to those who oppose him, those who are the cause of his distress, and he asks, how long will you love delusions and seek false gods. There's some great things when it comes to the world. There's some great things and some horrible things when it comes to the internet. One thing that is both equally great and terrible at the same time is you have the ability to look up your symptoms on Google and see what is going on with me. Am I going to die tomorrow? Right? And it's super handy because if you are near a phone or your computer, you just, there's no wait times. You don't have to drive anywhere. You don't have to wait on hold. There's no cost. You can search in the comfort of your home near all that toilet paper you bought. Right? So a few days ago while I was working, I was working away, writing stuff down, and I felt some pressure in my temples. Like, oh, that's not good. So I went to Google. And I was already on the computer, so I figured I'd figure out what's going on with me. So I typed out my symptoms, pressure and temple, that was it. And it said, first thing is like, okay, don't freak out. It could just be some, stress or something else. It could be, maybe some back spinal issues from, sitting or anything like that. Could be a tumor, or it could be a serious brain injury, which would make sense. But, but it could be any one of those. But if you are a doctor in the medical world, not those PhD doctors, but the doctors, if you're one of those doctors, I'm sure you get a little bit tense and frustrated when you hear people going to Google to figure out what's wrong with them and to get their treatment plan. Right? We go to Google to prescribe what we need, what we're going to do, what is our treatment plan for the next step. Right? Things like, this is happening, so I'm going to go on this extreme diet. Or I'm going to try bee sting therapy, which is apparently real. I'm going to try these different mix of liquids and things for detox or whatever else. Right? And they do all of these things without a whole lot of consideration that it might just be destroying their body over time. If I was a doctor, the medical doctor, and one of my friends was doing this, I'd be like, dude, I spent 16 years in doctor colleges to get this degree. Don't just trust the online doctor guy with that cartoon portfolio picture and trust that that Windex is going to get rid of that mole, right? Don't trust that guy. I'm the doctor, right? I'd feel a little hurt. I'd feel a little annoyed that people were saying that my degree is basically useless, or they're rejecting or discrediting not only me and the education that I received, but the people who gave me that education and their positions in their own education as well. And this is what King David is saying that's going on. These people in verse 2 in his kingdom, they are rejecting him and his position. And in turn, they are rejecting God and bringing shame on his glory because they are rejecting God's anointed king, order, and plans. They're turning against King David. Thus, they're turning against God. And they seek after false gods, turning away from God's plans and his design, and they fall in love with delusions and lies that are empty and cannot save them. In my own experience, when I am feeling down and I want to feel good when things aren't great, right? When things aren't going well, when I'm stressed or frustrated or angry or afraid or I'm hurting, I want relief. I want to be happy. I'm sure we all do. So there's times where I might choose to believe that something else in this moment will bring me immediate happiness or relief from my distress, or that it will just save me from my situation, right? Sometimes it might be a game. Sometimes it might be a relationship. It might be a TV show. It might be social media or some tasty ice cream or something like that, right? But a lot of times we think that something on this earth will give us immediate relief from our distress. And King David is crying out to the people. He's challenging them to reflect. How long will you try to find safety and happiness, prosperity, relief from the things in the world? How long will they seek after false idols and the lies and the delusions, the emptiness of the world? And all for what? What is the end of all these things? What is the end of these things that in the world that it brings us? God brings life. The world has emptiness and only brings death and separation from God. Think about this. What if you were asked by someone, when you are distressed, right? When you're feeling distress in life, going through all those emotions, what do you seek after? How do you respond in those situations? Do you seek after what the world offers, or do you seek after what God offers you? And David says in the next few verses, when we seek after God and when we remain in him, in our distress, peace is found in God. Verse 3, know that the Lord has set apart his faithful servant for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Tremble and do not sin. When you are on your beds, search your hearts and be silent. Offer the sacrifices of the righteous and trust in the Lord. Many, Lord, are asking, who will bring us prosperity? Let the light of your face shine on us. Fill my heart with joy when their grain and new wine abound. In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. So David's saying to these people now, the Lord listens to me. He has set apart myself and his faithful, obedient people for himself. He set us apart for himself. As believers, as followers of Jesus, we too have the confidence that God can hear and will hear our prayers. He hears the cries of our distress or the songs of our happiness even. But maybe you're sitting there and maybe you're thinking or feeling that you've clearly had times in your life, maybe even right now, today, where you feel like God isn't listening or God isn't hearing your prayers. Or it feels like you're just praying towards a ceiling or a wall and there's nothing else going on. And I know for myself at times, if Lily is talking to me and if she's asking me to do something or she's wanting to tell me a story or something else, she desires my full attention. She needs my full attention, which means that there's nothing in my hands, like my phone. There's nothing there. I'm looking directly into her eyes. I'm nodding my head, knowing that she knows that I'm paying attention, and then maybe I'll repeat something or give a question so that it's obvious that I know exactly what's going on. Then she knows I was listening, and I can do exactly what she asked me to do, and I don't have to ask 10 times. But God is not like us. He's not like us in that way. God is omnipotent. He's all-powerful. God is omniscient. He is all-knowing, and he is omnipresent. He is everywhere. God hears the prayers of his people, and God answers his people. It might not be an answer the way that you want. God answers, not necessarily in the way that you want. And I think for most of us, we probably want something that's like a big flashing sign on the road telling you what to do and where to go, because that's easier, because you don't have to think too much, you don't have to do too much. It's just like turn left or die, right? But God answers differently than the world, right? He answers how he wants to in his own timing. And King David shares his wisdom and his advice to the people who are opposing him. Right? With his experience and his relationship in God and his prayers to God, he advises them. He's giving them wisdom. He says, in your anger, do not sin. And when you lie on your bed, be quiet. Be silent. Reflect. Listen to God. And search your heart. How often, after a long and difficult day, or a difficult week, or month, or year, how often, whether it's from work or from relationships with spouse, kids, family, finances, health, anything else, how often do you lie down after that long day, at the end of the day, and just go over and over in your head? Like, how would I do things differently? Right? And we play through these scenarios in our head. Sometimes it's out of pure anger. Like, I would do this so differently, right? I would change it this way, I'd do this next, or maybe I'll get back at this person that way, right? Because that's not going to happen again, right? We experience distress, and our emotions, such as anger, fear, even happiness, if not brought before God, can lead us into sin, bringing us into more and more distress and disaster. The book of James says something very similar in chapter 1. It says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. In your distress of any kind, King David says, go to God, be quiet, and listen. And then listen some more. And then wait some more. And then listen. And if you're at that point where you're still trying to figure out what does it mean to listen to God and to hear his voice, right? It comes through being with God daily, spending time with him, spending time in his word, meditating on his word, talking to him, getting to know and understand his character, right? And leaving space and time for him to move in your life and speak to you, whether it's through your heart, through your head, through someone in your life, or through some other way. God speaks to you. But we have to know him and his character in his word to be able to understand how he talks to us. And Jesus tells us in John chapter 10, verses 27, he says, my sheep listen to my voice. They listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. His followers listen for his voice, and then they follow it. And David says, he then says, offer the sacrifices of the righteous and trust in the Lord. The sacrifice of the righteous and trust in the Lord is about their heart posture and how they are trusting the Lord in their obedience of what they're doing. Go to God, be silent, listen, wait, and then obey God in how he directs you, trusting in him sacrificially. In Genesis chapter 4, we see Cain and Abel, brothers, right? They both bring a sacrifice to God. Different sacrifices, but they both bring one to God. Abel brings the portions of fat from a firstborn of his flock. And Cain brings God fruit from the soil that he has worked. Right? And Abel's offering is accepted. Abel's offering is accepted and looked upon with favor by God, but Cain's offering is looked down upon by God. There was something missing from Cain's offering, and Hebrews 11 chapter 4 tells us that it was out of faith, that it was out of Abel's faith in God that his offering was accepted as righteous. And Cain's offering was different, not just because it was a vegetarian option, which I would understand why that would be looked down upon. Just joking. But Scripture shows us that Abel's offering was given out of faith. Right? And out of faith, we recognize our sin and our need for God. Right? Out of faith, we know that we need God. And Cain's offering was looked down upon because it was not given out of faith. This sacrifice of righteousness and trust in the Lord that David is talking about is the heart posture. It's about the heart posture of the people towards God. He desires his followers to love him wholeheartedly, and for that to be shown by how they offer their sacrifices out of faith to God. Now, we don't have the same sacrifices that David is referring to in Psalm 4, and some may say then that this would no longer apply to us because we don't have those, but it very much still applies to us. We sacrifice, or we should sacrifice to God every single day, right? Whether it is through our time, our finances, through our gifts, our talents, our resources, our relationships, or whatever it is, we should sacrifice to God. But what kind of sacrifice is it if it's not out of a loving faith to God or in God, trusting his ways? In verse 6, David mentions that the people are looking for something to bring them prosperity. And in verse 7, he says that even if they receive, some kind of prosperity through their harvests, right? God has even more filled his heart with joy, right? Even if they're prosperous and he's not, he has joy and peace from God. Even when people oppose him, and even when he is in danger or turmoil, in his distress, he says in verse 8 that, "In peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety." Do you remember when you were a kid, and maybe you're a kid now, or maybe you have a kid, but think about this, when you were a kid, what generally happens to children when there is a really, really loud thunderstorm at night, in the middle of night? Or when a kid gets a really bad nightmare and they're woken up? They get woken up. Right? If that happens to a kid, they will generally get frightened, scared, right? They'll be in distress. And chances are they're going to want to sleep in mom and dad's room, right? And right away, in mom and dad's room, with mom and dad, that kid will lie down and sleep peacefully, right? Because with their parents, they feel safe. And King David's adversaries, they're in distress. They are looking for something to bring them prosperity, to bring them happiness according to their plans, in hopes that that will bring them safety and then peace. Right? How often do you think in your life that if only I had more money, I could deal with this issue and be at peace? Or maybe you were like me when I was younger, and a good chunk of my life, I was thinking, if I just have, a good job, a good career that I love, if I have a car that's great, that works well, if I have a good house, if I get married, if I have 12 kids, then I will be at peace. 12 or more, that'd be great. Then I'll have the peace that I need, right? And I love what King David says back in verse 2 about this. He says that the people seek after delusions and false gods. How often do we think that so many things in this world will somehow bring us peace through worldly prosperity, through money, through a stable job, through social media, through television, through our possessions, through a certain relationship, right? And we think once that is figured out, once we have that, or once we have more than that, then we'll have peace. Church, true peace is found when we continually abide and remain in God. Peace is not just this momentary feeling that we get when we're distressed and we ask for it. Peace is a constant state of being that God gives those who abide in him. And the great thing is that peace isn't dependent on you. It's not dependent on your circumstance or what you own or what you can or cannot control. Peace, it's not a remedy that we get from God in specific times just when we need it. Peace is found as we remain in God. And we remain in God because we have faith in God and we trust in him, that through him we are kept safe. And in him we have everything that we need and can ever need. If you were here last week, I did the kids feature, and if you were to put most of these kids beside me, I'm like double their size. Right? I'm a pretty big guy next to a lot of the kids, and so at this height, the kids have to stare up to me, and that's going to give them back issues in the future. But when kids look at me, I feel like they look at me like I'm the big scary monster in all of the stories that they hear about. And the first thing that many do, if I'm trying to, it's like, hey, I want to give you a hug or something like that, the first thing a lot of them do is they scream, they cry, and they run. And they ask for help from mom and dad, like, help me. And even if it's like my nieces and nephews sometimes, like, it's just, I'm your relative. And as soon as they are in their parents' arms, once again, they're silent, right? And they are at peace because they know that they are safe. And they have trust in their parents to be at peace. And the older they get, the bigger and stronger this radius of peace gets as they grow closer to their parents, getting to know them, talking with them, having fun with them, experiencing and remembering the love, the provision, and the safety they receive from their parents. Through anything that you face in life, whether distress, hurt, anxiety, fear, happiness, peace is found in God. It is found in God. It's not something we take from God, like going to an ATM when you need cash. It's found and provided as you abide in Him and remain in Him and trust in Him for your needs. It is found when we are with God, when we grow with Him, we talk with Him, experience and remember His faithfulness towards His people. Right? And David is writing about the peace that he has found in God through his continuous relationship with God. In verse 3, he tells the reader that he knows that God will hear the prayers of His people, those who obey and abide in God. His faithful servants, He will listen. And regardless of whatever distress he is in, regardless of his circumstance or how much danger he is in, he can be quiet, listen to God, and he can sleep restfully in peace, knowing that God alone makes him dwell in safety. And something that I find somewhat backwards in this passage when it relates to the world is that David is showing that he's showing those who are actively opposing him how to find this lasting peace. Right? He's showing his opposers how to find this lasting peace, which is in God. How would you feel about sharing with your enemies how to find peace in God? That'd be difficult, right? And I don't know if you've ever thought this before, but your peace in God is a testimony. Your peace in God, the peace that you have in God and from God, that is your testimony. Right? It is a testimony to every single person that God puts in your life, regardless if they're family or friends or even your enemy. Right? In Psalm 4, showing us the unfortunate reality that so many people in this world are looking for ways to receive peace through gaining prosperity of some kind, getting more of something, hoping that if only I have more of this, if only this was working in my life, then I can finally be at peace, thinking that they are safe. And in Mark 4, Jesus and his disciples, many of us know this story, they're on a boat, and Jesus is sleeping in the stern, and the waves begin crashing back and forth, and water begins pouring into the boat. And finally, the disciples wake Jesus. They shake him, and the only thing they ask Jesus is if he cares if they drown. They say, Jesus, do you even care if we drown? And he rebukes the winds and the waves, and he says, be still. And they were. Then to his disciples he says, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? The lack of peace that they had in this moment was a testimony of their lack of faith in God to protect them in this moment, the lack of peace that they had. King David is using the peace that he has in God as a testimony for others to see and to follow and to receive the same peace that he has. I think out of everyone I know, my father-in-law has one of the biggest testimonies, one of the strongest testimonies I've seen of peace in God. Him and my mother-in-law, they only have 9 kids, so they have a good start. And all of which they've put through private Christian schools, and one of those kids is obviously my wife, Lily. But due to an accident, he hasn't been able to work for about 20 years or so. And my mother-in-law, basically since they started having kids when she was 19, she has not been working either. And every few weeks since I have known them, it seems like there is a new financial problem, a new financial distress that comes into their life, whether it's a car issue, a house issue, a family need, or something else. But regardless of how crazy or difficult their finances get or what situation comes up, I am amazed by his response every single time. In the midst of everything, he will say, "I'm excited. I'm excited. This is a great opportunity to see how God is going to provide." He gets excited. And some of the things that they've had to go through in their finances would paralyze so many people in fear and anxiety, right? But through his faith in God, through abiding in God and growing with him, he can sleep restfully in peace, knowing that God will keep him safe, that God will provide everything that he needs. His testimony of peace in God is powerful to Lily and I. It pushes us in our desire to be followers of Jesus who can be at such peace like that with every part of our lives, regardless of our circumstance. Think about the people that God has placed in your life, wherever you go, the people that you see every single day. What kind of things do you hear people stress over? What kind of things bring people anxiety or worry, fear, hurt? Do you hear about their finances? Do you hear about their relationships, their careers, health issues, family issues, or anything else? Right? Everyone in this world will struggle in some way, in some capacity, right? And in some way, some kind of distress will come. And in those moments, every single person will either seek after something or God to find peace. Because if we don't feel peace, it means we don't feel completely safe, right? And everyone wants to feel safe. Everyone wants to feel safe. Everyone wants to be at peace. But so often we think that it is the things of this world that we can obtain, or by changing something in our life, that we'll get the safety needed to feel finally at peace. Right? And the salvation found in Jesus is your testimony of peace to those around you. You know what's an unfortunate reality of this fallen world? It's that there will always be another problem in your life. There will always be something else, something that can bring you more distress. But what's your first step when distress comes? Psalm 46, verses 10 to 11 says, he says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. He is our protection." These verses come after saying how God brings the end of wars and how he destroys the weapons and the tools of his enemies. In the midst of your distress, be still and know that he is God. In March 2020, a time that most of us will probably never forget, our lives were changed drastically and turned upside down. What was your response to that global pandemic? In all honesty, my own response, my testimony of peace in God, it fell short. I struggled in those first few months. I struggled to find peace, and I struggled to be able to even share any resemblance of peace. But we have a merciful and righteous God who is patient and loving, and he continues to teach us and lead us into peace, regardless of our circumstances, as we wait on him and as we remain in him, and as we listen to his voice. What is your testimony of peace in God? What is your testimony of peace in God? When people look at you, when people come and see your life and the challenges you face, what is the testimony they see through you? Right? Do they see this unearthly peace that you find in God, something that you can't find in earth? Do they see that, regardless of your circumstance? Or do they see you searching for peace in this world? The world is full of people that don't have lasting peace. And it's because there's nothing in this world that can bring true salvation, true safety, no matter how hard we try. And it is in Christ alone that we receive everlasting peace through salvation. In 1 Peter 3:15 it says, "In your hearts revere Christ as Lord, and always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have." I want those in my life to know that I have a lasting peace that comes from Christ regardless of my circumstance. King David has found real peace. As followers of God, you have the peace that others need in this world. In any circumstance you face, seek after God wholeheartedly, and you will find peace in God. And every night you'll be able to say, like King David, "In peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety." I'm going to invite the communion teams forward as we take this time to be in communion together. This time of communion is for those who follow, who love Jesus, to reflect on his sacrifice for us, to reflect on the peace that he gives us in his sacrifice and in his resurrection. And if you haven't surrendered your life to Christ, we just ask that you stay seated. Please don't participate, and just observe and watch as the family of Christ participate together. We have communion tables at the front and at the back. And if you're not sure where to go, we should have a map that kind of helps you understand. If you are on the outer sections, just come on the outside into the front. There will be a station right in front of you. And if you are in the middle sections, just come down the middle, and you can all meet back in the other side of your section and go back into your row there. And I just want to remind you that through communion, we aren't here to take it, we receive it. So as you come to a station, allow those who are serving at the stations to hand you the bread, which is Christ's body broken for you. And allow them to hand you the cup, which is Christ's blood poured out for you. And each station has a gluten-free option as well. And once you have received the elements, just hold on to them, head back to your seats, and take some time to reflect. Reflect on the peace that you have found in God and the testimony of your peace to those around you, and listen to God and how he's giving you that peace. And once everyone has received the bread and the cup, and I'll come back up and I'll lead us through partaking in the bread and the cup together. Come forward and receive communion this morning.